The following presentation was recorded live at CALLERLAB's 20th Annual Convention. This is tape number 4, How to Program a Dance.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, ladies. My name is Tim Crawford. Hi. And welcome to, I commend you on your choice of probably the most exciting and stimulating session that you'll have at the CALLERLAB convention this year. I know you'll go away with a completely different understanding of not only programming, but also the three of these gentlemen up here. I'd like to introduce, and starting on my far left, is a man who probably really needs no introduction. So we'll move to Tim Marriner. Tim Marriner's from Norfolk, Virginia. He's been calling for about 17 years, international caller. He's called just about everywhere that there is square dancing. He's presently recording on Rhythm Records, and that's Tim. On my right is Jim Mayo from Hempstead, New Hampshire. Jim has been calling for 43 years, which is probably longer than our collective age is, I think. So Jim has seen everything that there is to see, experienced everything that there is to experience, and has been everywhere that you can go. And if there's anything that you want to know, I think that Jim will probably have an answer for it. He was the very first chairman of CALLERLAB, and presently you're a vice chairman, are you not? So, anyways, I'll go back to Jerry Story, who really does need no introduction. He's probably one of the most popular callers in the world, I would say, especially in my hometown, Stony Creek. They love him. We have 10 dancers there, and they love him, which represents 100% of the dancers, so that's great. Anyways, Jerry is from Mission, Texas, and has been calling for a bunch of years, and has been also just about everywhere. The collective experience of these three gentlemen is a wealth of information and knowledge, and without much further ado, I'll let them pass that on to you. What we'd like to do is take about 15 minutes for anybody to say anything that they have to say here. Then we're going to have a wide-open discussion session, and if you do have a question or anything, the other thing I do ask is that you use the microphone, because this all is being taped for later reference, and for all the panelists, we also need to use the microphone and everything. I'll try to repeat a question if you'd rather not come all the way to the front, but it would be nicer if you had your name and your question and your voice on the tape, because it makes you, sort of famous when other people listen to the tape. And I think that's important. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for all the panelists. And we'll lead off with Mr. Tim Marriner.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate that. We're talking this morning about programming, and why? Why are you here? What's the big deal about programming? What is programming? I view programming as a set of goals. It's a plan of action. It's something that you wish to accomplish, something that will have an end result. Now, there are various types of programmings involved in square dance calling. First of all, you can program an entire season. Let's say we're at a retirement village, as Jerry is, or something like that. You have to lay down a plan of action for the entire season. That's one form of programming. Another thing that you can program is a dance, one individual dance. Working on peaks and valleys, as we're going to discuss here this afternoon or this morning. Also, you can program a particular tip, and Jim is going to probably do more emphasis on that as we get involved in the discussion. Then there's also, within the tip realm of programming, you can actually program within the tip, which we refer to as micro-programming, or you can actually just program sequences or anything, setups, get-outs, any choreographical zingers. As you're thinking, you are programming within the particular tip that you program as well. Those are the four major types of programmings that we do with square dancing. Why do we even need to bother with programming then is another question. What's the difference? What difference does it make? I show up at a dance, I pull my briefcase out, and I pan through my records, I throw the hoedowns on, I do a singing call, repeat it 7 times. It's a dance. They pay me my check, we're happy, and I go home. The next week we show up again, I take the briefcase out, I go through the records again, do hoedowns and singing calls, and that's about it. See, the idea of programming is setting some goal. We're going to try to meet that goal and achieve it. If you're doing it on the fly, it is a form of programming, but I'm not sure if it is the most successful form of programming. I think you have to ensure that there's variety, and by ensuring that, you want to make sure that you're using fresh music, fresh ideas, choreographical Michelangelos, as Ed Foote puts them sometimes. You have to make sure that you cover all of the material on the given CALLERLAB program. And sometimes if you're in a workshop or a class, and if you don't have a program listed, you can skip moves. And this is why dancers today can't dance the cross-trail throughs and the various other moves that aren't high frequency, because we forget to use those. We all have our pet calls that we like to use all the time. So with a program, you're regimentating yourself to utilize calls that maybe you wouldn't use all the time, or singing call records and things of that nature. So that is a reason. The other reason that you want to utilize a program, in the long run, it'll help you become a more proficient, skillful, and successful caller. That's another reason. Everybody got a handout that Jim passed out. If you all just pick that up, do you have that right there? All right, if you will raise it up in the air, turn it over and look at the blank side. You got it? Here is your most important tool for programming. It's a blank sheet of paper, folks. It's as simple as that. Get it, use it. Fold it in half, jot it down, and start programming with it. All right? By taking a piece of paper and jotting your ideas, you're making sure that you're establishing, or that you are going ahead and achieving some of these goals. All right? Before you can even put anything down on a sheet of paper, though, there are a couple of variables or factors that do affect programming. I like to refer to these as known factors and unknown factors that affect programming. Some of the known factors that will, before you can even put anything on the piece of paper, some of the known factors would be, you know the billing of the dance. You know if it's a workshop, a class, if it's a dance, if it's a festival. You know what CALLERLAB program that you're going to be having to utilize, whether it's going to be basic, mainstream, plus advanced, or challenge. You know that particular program ahead of time, hopefully in a contract. You probably are aware of the length of dance. If it's going to be a 2.5-hour session, a 2-hour session, if you're going to have rounds in between the sessions, if it's going to have a demonstration, if you're going to have a meal in between somewhere at a break for 9:30, like sometimes they do in some clubs, or if there's going to be a break at the end. You usually know that before you go into the dance. All right? So these are known factors. Also, you know your own abilities and strength and weaknesses, hopefully, as a caller. You know that if you know your strength is choreography, for example, and getting dancers through choreography, then you're aware of that up front, and you can program in order to highlight or showcase what you know best or what you do best. You also will be aware ahead of time of your health. Health affects your programming. If you have a cold or some form of problem, you can't program your zinger singing calls in the key of O. Okay, you just can't program. You can't program in the key of Oxidine up high, or maybe you're just not singing well, and so you're going to do Charlie Daniels singing calls. Okay, I'm going to do singing calls where I can just pretty much talk. All right, so with that in mind, you're going to program. You know that ahead of time. Some of the unknown factors, however, that affect before you put down anything on the sheet of paper would be the acoustics of the hall. You don't know what's going to be faced if you haven't been in that particular facility to dance. You're not aware of the acoustics. Maybe you're not familiar with the sound equipment. All Hiltons are not created equal. For some reason, they all have their own unique sound to them. These tone and treble knobs up front all are a little bit different. All right, now if you're not familiar with the equipment or the hall, maybe they're not using the speaker system that you normally use. That affects how you're going to program if they can't hear it. The ambiance of the hall, whether the setup's in front of you, beside you with a table, the decorations, lights are low, if it's too hot, if it's too cold in the hall, if the floor is sticky, slippery, you're not aware of that before you go into that hall. You're also probably not aware of the crowd or the lack thereof. All right. If you have a big crowd, your programming can be affected by that. You don't want to do a lot of relay the deuces if that hall is already sardine-like. All right, because they'll be spread out. You can't do comfortable spread out actions. Those you have to be. I think the key thing about the unknown factors is you have to be flexible in your program. Just because you put it down, and I recommend, we're going to discuss it here next, that if you take this sheet of paper and you fold it in half, at least in half, you can then take down and jot down some ideas. If you were to number the sheet of paper, all right, with the known factors, let's say you're going to do a 2.5-hour dance. You're going to take up front, you're going to put the club, the program level, and things like that, and I always put the date on the other side of the page in order just to, as a reference to go back to it, should you need to. You're going to take and write down on this sheet of paper 1 through 7. And then on the side of it, you're going to put the first tip, tip 1, all the way through. And in your mind, you have to already pre-program what you want to do. Where are you going to take these dancers during the dance? Are you going to peak them right up top, put them on the ceiling, and leave them there through the entire dance? It works for some, all right? You can do that. Are you going to try to create the peaks and valleys and give the dancers an experience where maybe the next song I'm going to whisper, and they're all going to sing, or things like that. A lot of things that you have to also be aware when programming is age for the dancer as well, or the ability of the dancer. You might not be aware of the ability of the dancer. If that dancer can't dance the mainstream program efficiently as you wished, and you have choreographed in your mind plus material, then you need to change that program. You have to be flexible, and you have to use good judgment in order to flex with what's in front of you. And if you write it and use it in pencil, you can erase it and change it or put additions. And why I say you can fold it in half is on the other side of the page, you're then going to put the choreography or routines that you want to try to enhance it with during each tip. I just wrote down a couple of things. Tip 1, let's say you have a patter call and a singing call. You're going to do that at the first tip. I normally will have a patter call that uses a lot of rhythm, something that's not too busy in music-wise, in order for the dancer to be able to get used to my voice, to hear the commands, and they know that they're now in sync as they shuffle their feet on the floor. They're dancing around, something they can hear. If that music is real hot and busy, that first tip, and they can't hear you, then the rest of the evening is, yeah, but I just couldn't understand them. They make their impression the first 2 minutes while you're calling, while you're into that routine. They already know if they like you or not. And I can tell you from experience, being a young caller, we have to go out even a little to gain respect for the dancer. You got a lot of older people out there that we're calling to, and they think, what's this young guy up here, this young buck? Is he the caller? No way he's the caller. And you have to go up there and convince the dancer right off that you're in charge. Okay? And with your programming, you have to be able to do that. The singing call, you're going to try to gain their confidence. And you have to use a singing call routine that you're familiar with, something that you feel comfortable in utilizing. If you try to use a brand new singing call right at the top and you mess it up, well, they're going to think, this guy's incompetent. All right off the bat. So something you're familiar with, zing them with something, get them up, and they're dancing. Tip 2, you want to get them to listen a little bit more. Maybe you want a patter record that's more melodious, something that has more melody in it, that they can just kind of be tranced into singing the melody while they're doing the choreography. That sometimes can help. And then you want to show them what you can do. You want to give them a nice show tune that will show off your talents, and they think, wow, this guy's pretty good. And they go on. And as the evening progresses, that's the attitude. You're going to get them up. Maybe the third tip, and I say maybe because it will all the variables take into effect. Maybe the third tip, you might want to utilize some workshop material, maybe a quarterly selection. Then you're going to use a workshop-styled patter record, something that just has a beat to it that they know it's okay, we're getting to business. Now, there's a big difference between the records for patter that you're going to utilize at a class than it is at a festival. At a festival, you're going to jump them up, play, let's go. At a class, more often you're going to have some music there that they can hear the beat and rhythm and pay attention to your calls and commands that are given. That would be good. Now, the singing call after a workshop, I like to use something that's fun. Maybe you can do a crooner, something that they can enjoy and listen to, or anything with nice rhythm. They've just been through a workshop, folks. All right? They've been through a little bit of brain teasing, and now you want to let them relax and just enjoy a song. That's what I like to do there. On the fourth tip, maybe you want to have some fun themes in the choreography. Again, Jim's going to work on that. And then you're going to probably do another show tune or something nice. If they're going to have a food break right after that, well, then it's good to do something real nice that they can sing along with, because during the break they're going to whistle that tune, and they're going to say, boy, that was a nice song. Oh, they're walking through singing that song as they're getting their food. If you do a workshop just before a break like that, they're going to think, oh, boy, was that work? And that's what they're discussing during the breaks. So you don't like to do things like that. That's probably not going to enhance your program. Then, again, the next tip after a break like that, sing a couple. Maybe you want to do 2 singing calls. Again, be flexible. And if the dancers are advanced level dancers at a plus dance, and you're doing choreography plus material with a advanced degree of difficulty, and the dancers like that sort of thing, then you're not probably going to do 2 singing calls there, okay? Because maybe they want to hear the choreographic challenges as they go along. Again, you have to be flexible with the people. At least towards the end of the evening, you're going to do something, maybe 2 singers at the end. Have a crooner that they can say, boy, this guy has a voice too. Listen to that voice. And good showmanship. And then at the end, you're going to leave them with wanting more. You're going to put out your best material right there, probably, so that they can get out that door singing the song that you just finished. And all the way home, they're going to be whistling, "It's a small world after all," or whatever it is that you're going to use as that final zinger. And they'll remember you a lot better and will probably be more likely to hire you back, which is all important to us at this point in time. Proper programming will allow to do that. It might seem elementary that we actually sit down and worry about this, but we want to assure that there's variety in your program. A program is a plan of action, and you have to lead the dancers to some total fulfillment of fun and excitement within the dance. And by doing this, you want them, by planning this program, I think you can achieve that. You want to be flexible. You want to be able to adjust to the needs of the dancers, to the environment of the hall and the facilities. And most of all, you have to use good judgment. You will become a more proficient and skillful caller if you actually do program and take the time to do that. Go back through, and if you're flexible at a dance while you're programming and something's not going good, you can actually go back and make a note of that on that page. You can go back through the next time you come through the town again. I call for this, people. And if you were to even jot down what you wore, you don't want to wear the same stuff all the time to that one club. You can actually make note of that on your program. In theme of the convention, you're programming to improve the dance experience and not becoming alive at the improv. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Jim Mayo.
Tim's young and he can stand up, so both Tims. I'm one of those older gentlemen, so I'm going to stay sitting down. If any of you did not get a copy of the handout, we have extras up here, so do come and get them because I'm going to talk about them. Now, I think there were extras scattered around through the floor. One observation I would make following on what Tim Marriner just said with regard to keeping a record of your programs, it's an aside on the subject of programming, but I keep a record of the things I've called in a calendar book. It is a full page in the book for each day of the week and each day of the year. And I've been assured by my accountants and my past experience with the IRS that they love nothing better than to see a bound record that has been maintained day by day. And so as a record of income, mileage, additional expenses like motels and meals, that bound book is a very handy way in which to keep the records that Tim was referring to about what you have called for the clubs, which singing calls you've used, and many of my friends who use the same method also keep track of what they wore. Couples who wear matching outfits find that a particularly useful thing because they don't want to wear the same outfit back to the same group. One additional observation about that with respect to the groups that you call for every week, I find it's very helpful to keep a checklist of singing calls so that I don't repeat them too often. On the other hand, I think one of the great sins that square dance callers are guilty of is that we get bored with songs. And so we keep on introducing new songs. If you listen to the program of the great singing performers, you will recognize that as they start into the song that the audience knows as well as the performer, they always get a round of applause. We callers, I think, too often overlook that and keep throwing new material and don't let the dancers do those songs that they really love. Think about that. But my thrust today is to talk about tip themes. In our note services and magazines, we are flooded these days with material, choreographic material to offer to our dancers. I find as I look through it that much of it is more complicated than the dancers I call for can handle comfortably. Some of it's very intriguing material. It's entertaining and it would be fun. But if I call it to the floors that I call for, I have chaos and catastrophe scattered all over the floor. You can't take a complicated figure that includes unfamiliar material and call it to the dancers cold. Just lay it out for them. They won't succeed. On the other hand, if you will develop their skills with the pieces of that routine, you can very often get them through things that they would not be able to dance if you just laid it on them. The handout that you have here is an attempt to show you in detail how I go about planning a tip based on a particular call, and in this case the call is scoot back. The important message that I would like to leave with you today is that to develop a theme means to present it to the dancers in an increasing difficulty sequence, so that you start out with things that you're pretty sure they're going to succeed with. You then step in small steps through the degrees of difficulty until you reach the point where they have perhaps been stretched, if that's your goal, but hopefully you will recognize the breaking point before you get to it. Our message throughout this convention is the dancing experience. And when you break down the floor, the dancing experience ceases. The goal is to provide them with variety, different ways of using the same call, but without breaking them down. To do that, you must know, you must be aware of how much more difficult each step of your plan becomes. If we use the choreographic applications booklets that have been prepared by the Choreographic Applications Committee, a wonderful piece of work, incidentally, it makes it very clear that with scootbacks, as long as the same sex is going into the center for the turn-through, most dancers will succeed without any difficulty. I have called for groups where that works as long as the sex that's going in is boys. As soon as I send the girls in, I get a hiccup or a flinch. Not many. Most groups can handle it with either. But as soon as you send both a boy and a girl into the center for the turn through, you start to separate the skilled from the not so skilled, the experienced from the not so experienced. And so the development of the sequence that you see here in front of you recognizes that and starts out by reminding them about scoot back. We use it first with boys going in, and then in the second sequence with the girls going in for the scoot back, for the turn in the middle. In the third sequence there, I think that's the one in which we step off into deeper water by having one boy and one girl meeting each other for the turn through. Even that, however, isn't quite as traumatic as the next step, where we have just the two people in the center of a two-faced line doing a scoot back. I've taken a step back in that all of the people involved are girls. I've not involved the boys in that one. I could put an intermediate step in there and do that same routine, the same type of routine, with just the centers, meaning boys this time, do a scoot back. I didn't include that one here, but if I got a flinch with just the girls, I might decide that that's far enough. That's all the choreographic excitement that this group today needs. Just because I have a plan that goes all the way to a quarter tag setup with mixed sex doesn't mean I have to go that far tonight. I've got a place to go. I've got a routine. If I find a hotshot group and they can handle it, then I've got it available. But just because I planned it doesn't mean I have to do it. My goal is to provide variety without disaster. I want them to have a changing choreographic experience, but one at which they'll succeed. And if I work them through these steps one at a time, I can begin to see the signs of tension build. Maybe I do the first boy-girl scoot back and discover, piece of cake, they have no trouble with this. I might skip a sequence. The message is, make a plan. Have it available. Be prepared to use it as far as it's appropriate for the group you're working with tonight. Don't feel that because you have the plan, you have to go through every step of it, or that you have to go all the way to the end of it. It's a tool which we use as appropriate. I also suggest that this plan might very well carry you for more than one tip. Perhaps you, in the second or third tip, remind them of scoot backs, reintroduce the notion of mixed sex turns in the center. Perhaps you even introduce the concept of the quarter tag setup for scoot back. And then, in a later tip, extend to the rest of the steps. The message is, have a plan. Be sure that it is progressive difficulty so that you don't start off with the toughest version first. Very often I've seen callers do that. They have a wonderful piece of choreography that they captured from the book, and they jump right in and try to call it with disastrous results. My goal as a caller is to get 100% dancer success in every tip. I don't always succeed, but I always try. One of the ways that I can do that is by knowing the difficulty of the material I'm presenting and organizing it so I present it in increasing degrees of difficulty within the capability of the group I'm calling for tonight. I see a question hanging out here, but you've got to get it on the microphone, so come and use the microphone to ask the question.
My question is, I've heard, I'm a relative young caller myself, but I've heard older callers say they have walked in on a club and the president of the club would set the level at which they want the dance call for the night. example, they would want them to call it the break of breaking down the floor for challenge. So how would you handle a situation like that?
I'm a firm believer that the judgment about the success or lack thereof at a dance is a matter for my control. I appreciate any comments that the hiring people have to make. I don't know very many dancers who are capable judges of the success rate on the floor, and I'm sure that if they're dancing, they don't have a clue. I smile and say thank you for the input, and I'll certainly strive to meet the goals that you've set for me, and I hope you enjoy the dance. I'll then call my dance. Hopefully, this will be useful information to you. Again, don't treat it as this is a gospel and Jim calls it this way every time he steps up to the microphone. This is a guide, a tool, a suggestion that you will, each of you, interpret and use as it is appropriate to your skills and the skills of your dancers. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Jerry Story, please remain seated.
Good morning. Thank you. Just to kind of recap what Tim has said and what Jim has said, what we're going to do is try to create the total outline here for you. And then also what we're talking about is programming a dance as well as programming a tip. But I don't know for sure that each tip has to be so regimentedly programmed. But let's kind of go through what we've all talked about. We all decided that the first tip, we dance them, we kind of feel the floor around, find out what they can do, what we can expect for the rest of the night, basically. Number 2, on the outline, we've discussed the theme tip. Something that is going to enhance our dance, whether it be a new call or all position on a mainstream call, a recycle with the girl on the end, or a left-handed a linear cycle, or whatever you want to do. Whatever that you pick for your theme, we're talking about doing that in number 2 tip. Number 3, we're talking about coming back and trying to enhance that same thing that we just did in the second tip for the people that maybe didn't get it so well. And if the floor did get everything that you wanted them to, maybe you could add something else to it in the third tip. The fourth tip, we're talking about possibly, Tim brought up maybe 2 singing calls, if it's in the middle of the evening and you want to do that. And a slow and fast call, I think so, maybe a relaxer and a hot singing call on the fourth tip. The fifth tip, we've decided that basically we start recapping the dance. We go back and pick up the stuff we did in tip 2, we pick up the stuff we did in tip 3, and we start recapping the dance. And again, you may have to help some of the ones that are having a little trouble. What you're trying to do is build your dance up to a crescendo. Your 6th tip, you come back, and by then, you figure if you've done your job, you should be able to call the material, just let it flow. And those that get it, and those that don't, you tried your hardest. If you did your job well, the entire floor should dance the 6th tip very well. 7th tip, maybe sing twice and go home. That would be a 7-tip outline. If you got 8 tips or 9 tips, of course, you can put them in as needed. Let's go back. One of the important tips would be tip 2. We're talking about the theme tip again. And this really is an important tip. The number one thing I see so many callers do, they call such long sequences, they don't have time to program the tip. They get them in, they keep them going, they keep them going, they keep them going, and the longer you keep them going, the more squares are going to break down on you. And then they try to do their theme in there somewhere. By then they've lost some of the floor because they've called so long. These sequences in your tip, I feel, have to be quick. You start off your tip, you dance them a little bit, get them warmed up in the beginning of your tip. You come right back. Let's use this as A, B, C, and D. We've got our outline. This is number 2 that we're talking about, tip 2. You start out with a little dancing them. B, you're going to throw them that little curveball or whatever you want to theme that tip around. You're going to throw that out there, that little curveball to them. C, you're going to have to come back and help them with that curveball, those that didn't make it. You're going to have to come back and help them with that. D, you would dance that curveball now. And each one of these are little sequences because you're making up a whole tip. You're going to have a nice long tip when you're all done. D, C, you were helping them with the curveball. D, you're dancing that curveball or your theme for that tip. After you dance it, you're still going to lose a few. So basically what we're doing here is outlining a tip just like we outlined the whole dance. Only we're refining it down to one tip now. D, we danced that curveball. E, if you danced it, you're sure probably going to have 2 or 3 squares maybe that's still out there that didn't really get it. Well, you want them to win too. So on letter E, you want to go back and quickly help those that didn't get it and come back and try your last sequence to get everybody through what you're doing, and that would be F. Your last sequence should bring them out feeling good, that they've accomplished what you want them to do. And tip 3, you're going to come back and review that now, remember, just what you've done there, plus add a little bit of something if you want. Tip 4, if you're going to sing, that's great. Number 5, tip 5, you're going to go back and recap now. You're going to go back to that tip 2 and go through this same outline again and do the same thing over and include tip 3 in there. If you added something else, maybe a little different formation, maybe start putting some get-outs with it. Instead of having them go through all the work of learning whatever it is you want them to learn for that theme and then doing a square through 3 to an element left. That's okay, but sometime down the line, maybe try to use whatever you were incorporating into that tip to resolve the square. And basically, that's it. 6, we dance them, and 7, sing them and go home. Thank you all very much.
Just in summary of everything, if I may be so bold, I guess it boils down to the fact that in order for us to do our job effectively and consistently, because we need to put effort into it, and there's more than taking singing lessons or learning how to dress. You have to actually sit down and take the time to do it. And we're going to like to field some questions now. So if you are going to come up and use the microphone, state your name, your annual income, and then you can ask your question.
My name is John Granger. I'm from Germany. How do you program a dance if you're going to be getting a caller from another country coming in and you don't know each other?
Do you mean if you're the caller that's coming in from another country?
Well, either way. Either you're coming into or you have someone else coming in and you got to dance, you're going to work together.
I see.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much. The question is, as I understand it, is then how am I going to program the dance with another caller that I don't know? Okay. I would probably sit down with that other caller before the dance sometime and go through a few records and say, hey, do you do this record? Have him go through your record box. You go through their record box. Find a particular record that you want to do. And if you have time, you can rehearse it. That would help. That's for singing call routines. For patter routines, you're almost on your own unless you want to sit down and take the time and say, why don't we theme scootbacks? A lot of times when callers work together, though, it's interesting, there's a connection. And when you get them in a sequence and you do a curveball, as Jerry put it, the other caller will come back and enhance that curveball or do the curveball, only have it curve the other way. And so you can work with each other as a team and during the tip as you're going along. That sometimes can work out real good if you're flexible enough.
One observation I would make with that is that, unfortunately, and it has not to do with whether they're from another country or from the next town, when two callers work together, they often get into a mode of impressing each other. And the customer tends to suffer in those circumstances. It's very enjoyable to work with another caller who shares the goal of making the overall experience comfortable for the dancers. I have many times observed callers who set out trying to impress each other as they work together at the expense of the dancers.
Oh, I'll say his name, Mr. Jerry Helt.
Two people, two callers in this hall who've called longer than I have.
He's one of them.
And he's one of them.
I left my walker back there. I have a question for all of you. There's a big difference, I think, between road calling or festival calling programming for that and programming for a regular club where you go in every week or every other week. Could you enlighten us on what the programming is between those two?
The latter is the harder. A road caller, and I have done some of each. Mostly I'm a local club caller, and I go back week after week to the same people. But that job, to me, is more difficult. One of the joys of the road show is that you can use the same show tomorrow night that you used tonight because it's a different crowd. One very important thing for the club caller who's going back week after week is to keep good records. I remember many years ago, one of my dancers in my club, and I've been calling for this club for 27, 8 years now, came and said, "Why is it that you always call tag the line in the third tip?" You do? And I went back and looked in my calendar book, and sure enough, the third tip for the last 7 or 8 weeks had been tag the line. Why? Because Tag the Line was at that time a new call. It had just been introduced. And those of you who work with Tag the Line realize that it's not the easiest of our calls to understand. Its capacity to get us in choreographic difficulty is almost unlimited. And I had been working with it. Well, my program plan for my club is to workshop in the third tip. And in the third tip for the last 8 weeks, I had been calling Tag the Line. I think it takes 8 weeks for dancers to begin to realize that, but it can happen. The message here is be sure that you keep records. Also, Tim Marriner started out by saying we can plan for a whole season. Whether you're in a retirement park in Texas or in Topsfield, Massachusetts, that's an important message for the club caller. Do set out with goals at the start of the season, choreographic skills that you want to add to your dancer's capability, and then set about adding them in the same way that you plan a tip. You plan each week or each month to increase their familiarity with a particular call or routine. It is a different experience, and as I say, I find it very challenging to go back week after week. Keeping good records is even more important in that setting.
Do you have a comment? I personally, I don't think I ever go off the outline that we just went through. Ever, never. I might change choreography. I might change figures. I might change singing calls. But the basic outline, to me, stays the same, whether I'm working a local program or whether I'm on the road touring or whether I'm in my RV park in South Texas. I call to the same people every day. But I don't change my outline. When they come in there to dance, I want to find out what they can do first. I want to throw them a little spice, the second and third tips, and I want to dance them with that material. As I've created a tool for my use, that second tip. And I want to be able to use that, whatever it is irrelevant. I think it's a basic outline. We just went through it. And I don't change. Like I said, change singing calls, maybe change choreography. You're going to change levels, But the basic outline, if anybody has any questions on it, if anybody doesn't understand anything on that outline, because I think that's the important thing. We all discussed the same outline, basically. So if anybody does have any questions on it, please feel free to ask.
Folks, just again to reiterate what Jerry said, same outline. Go back to the question that Mr. Helt discussed. I have to say Mr. Helt, right? Yes. Going back to the question again, I'm fortunate enough to have a Wednesday night group that I call for concurrently, and it's you cannot go back and use the same singing calls that you would on a road all the time to your home club week after week because they've heard those. They although they do enjoy to hear that Pink Cadillac song every once in a while, but on the road, you want to get out there and use that show stuff. At home, sometimes you're going to experiment, use a new Royal record, for example, or something like that, something that's come out. That's how I would address it.
I had a funny comment about Jim mentioned that the club caller is the harder thing to do which is true. But on the road, he said you can use the same show. The next night I had a funny thing happen to me that I should tell you about. Sometimes you can't use it, the same thing. I was calling in upstate Michigan, where it's predominantly German, and I have a German singing call called Sprechen Sie Deutsch. I think Jerry Hilt did it. That's where I heard it first time. Nevertheless, I did the singing call, and I have everybody bounce, and they dance around, and I talk in a German accent with, have them pretend they wear Lederhosen, and I say I'm Prosit and Jawohl and Vor Fräuleins Promenade and everything. Well, the very next day I went to Montreal to call the dance in Montreal. So I thought it would be kind of neat because it was so successful the day before to do it in Montreal. So I did it in Montreal. However, the predominant population there is Jewish, and they really did not appreciate it at all, as a matter of fact. And so sometimes, Tim was saying that you have to, it's one of the known things I never ask religious questions when I get to a dance anyways. I usually ask them what level they dance, are they good or poor dancers, and, do they like to have a lot of fun? I never say, are they predominantly Catholic or Jewish or anything, so it was a complete surprise. But that's one of the unknown things that you have to learn to compensate for.
Turn your tape over at this time for the continuation.
Is he Yiddish? Yes. Don't forget to say your name. I don't think it's going to make a difference.
My name is Keith Stevens. I'm from State College. Jim, I have a question to you, particularly, but I appreciate all your answers. We're talking this morning about eliminating calls from lists, changing lists, and so forth. How do you think programming affects the lists, the calls, the frequencies, and so forth? And do callers' use or non-use of programming have an effect on this issue we're dealing with?
It's funny you should ask. Indeed, it's relevant, and certainly our use of calls affects what dancers are able to do, and what dancers are able to do affects our choice of calls. I personally believe that it's important in programming a dance to use all, or at least nearly all, of the calls on whatever list you're using. On the other hand, I have done a fair amount of frequency counting, where I take a tape of a dance, mine or somebody else's, and I've done several dozen tapes now from all over the country, and counted the number of times that each call is used in each tip. And one of the things that's amazing as you do that is to realize that if you've got 3 pages listing 150 calls on the Plus program, or 2.5 pages listing all the calls on the mainstream program, 95% of the dance, or at least 90% of the dance, is all on the first page. The calls that are used most frequently represent almost the entire dance. The rest of the calls on the list will make up 1 or 2% at most. It is very important that we keep the whole program that's available to us in use. On the other hand, just a minor comment on the things we were discussing this morning, it's my feeling that there are a great number of things on the mainstream list, or the Plus list, that could be removed from that program without having any noticeable impact on the dancing experience, because in fact they are not now used. The first time I encountered frequency counting, Clark Baker came to my dance 10, 12 years ago and took home the tape and then sent me a nice computer printout of my dance. I was shocked to discover that 10% of my Plus dance that evening was the one call right and left through. I would urge you all, as an interesting experiment in programming awareness, to do a frequency count for yourself. It is a very revealing experience. Yes.
Rich Gearman, California. One programming technique that I've had a lot of fun and good reaction to is the idea of taking, if you're going to theme a tip around one move, write yourself an opening zinger that uses that move into, or as close as you can get it into, a right and left grand, and then close the tip with a rotational figure sequence that uses the same figure. I've gotten a lot of good dancer response to that. Something else that kind of ties in the whole concept of programming to improving the dancer's experience and recruiting, promoting, maintaining, all that kind of thing is, I feel it's as important to program your class tips for just as much dancer enjoyment as you would for a regular hoedown or a club night or anything else. Because, face it, once you have people on the floor in a class, once you've taught them circle left, Alaman left, and do-sa-do, you have square dancers. You don't have class students. You have square dancers. And as long as their dancing experience is fun and they're enjoying themselves, they're going to continue coming. As long as it feels like work, you're going to probably start losing them.
Thank you, Rich. Are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm Carl Brandt from Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's always interesting to me as Jim and these fellows up here say that they're going to theme a tip. And I've often wondered how many of the callers theme, let's say, the scoot back and follow, since their success, followed immediately in the singing call to let them enjoy it. Is that all right?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. My basic philosophy of calling is anything that we do habitually needs to be changed. It's certainly a good idea occasionally, and absolutely I use it in teaching. In a class setting, I use the singing call as an opportunity to let people dance the material that they have just been workshopping. On the other hand, I would not want my dancers to build the expectation that after every tip, the patter theme material would be the basis for the singing material. So sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Are there further questions? Great.
Johnny Burns, St. Louis, Missouri. I would like, since you gentlemen are professionals, it seems that there is this situation all over the country. We're losing dancers. There's very few dancers. Whereas there is just no new dancers coming in. I would like your ideas why you think this present state exists.
First of all, I would just say we're all professionals. Not us. I mean, I'm not just us. I mean, the minute you got paid, you're professional. So, and you're taking the time and effort to learn more and also to be with your peers. You're here in this convention because you're professional. And so that's how I would address that. As far as the problems, that's going to be a debate that we'll have throughout the convention, and maybe we should leave it with the committees. I don't.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Yes, sir.
My name is Austin Kane. I'm from Canton, Georgia. In the Atlanta area, most of the clubs dance at a mainstream level, but they also want plus tips introduced during the night. And that creates a problem on the building sequence of a dance. Do any of you have any suggestions how you can build yet interject a couple of plus tips along with your main theme?
If it's a problem, I don't see why you couldn't do it at the end of the dance unless the club just absolutely insists on doing them in the middle. I don't really like to do any kind of a star tip in the middle of any dance for that very reason. It puts me out of my outline, and I don't like that. I like to be in control of the dance, and when they do that to me, so if the club comes up and says, "Hey, we want a star tip right now," I'll do my best to talk them out of it. Say, "Why don't we do it at the end? You know, we're on a roll here. I've got a game plan in mind, and I'm very adamant about it. I don't want to get out of my game plan, so I'll try to put that star tip at the end. That's okay. You can bring the dance to an end, say goodnight to a few people, and then do your star tip at the end." So.
programming in Sweden is very difficult for that same matter, because they actually start off, you have to call a basic tip, then you have to call a mainstream tip, then you have to call a basic tip, and then you have to call a plus tip. Basic, mainstream, basic, mainstream, basic, plus. You don't ever get off a microphone, and the same dancers are on the floor all the time.
That's the saving grace.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Whole new ball game, too.
Yeah, it's a whole new game.
I feel much the same way about the refreshment break. I set into my game plan, and I get about halfway through, and then they say, now we're going to have 15 minutes of announcements, and after that we'll all break for coffee, and when I come back, I'm starting over again. It's a brand new dance. I've never found a successful way to bridge that gap and carry the feeling that I built in the first part of my program over the refreshment break into the second part. If I had my druthers, I'd love to gather around with coffee and sandwiches after the dance. But when you put it in the middle, it interrupts my plan.
Yeah, those interruptions are probably the worst thing that happens for me anyways. I had it on Saturday night. I was calling in Rochester, and we had the Energizer Bunny go through on the fourth tip with banging a drum. Right after that, they had announcements. Then right after that, they had their coffee break. And then they had a round dance showcase. The round dance skiers did a showcase. So I did 3 tips in the night. I just thought I'd let you know that.
I feel your pain.
Thought you might be a little sympathetic. Is there any other questions? Yes.
This is going to be more for the people that have a lot of round dancing. But how can you work a round dance program along with your tip and have a nice build level, if you want to call it?
I don't have round in my club.
Work with the best round dance cures you can find.
Good answer.
That's it.
That's about it, really. I'd probably just to open a dialogue with your round dance cure at the beginning of the night, maybe too, just to tell them maybe what you're going to do. Maybe let them in on your program so that, and if they're at all, sensitive to what it is you're trying to do, perhaps they can also do it too.
Thank you. Irv Tusinger from Cape Cod, Mass. And I think the comment on this, I usually sit and say nothing most of the time, but this is one that sort of brought me up, is the same idea as you have a round dance cure, that as soon as you get your program lined up and you know exactly what you're going to do, he puts on that zing polka. The dancers get through and they're foaming at the mouth, and you're trying to start them over again.
You've had dancers foam at the mouth.
Was it? Oh, it was me. Hey, that's a problem. That is a tug-of-war problem with programming, and you're going to have that. And the only thing you can do is adjust to what happened. The best thing that I can say is just to adjust to it. And then after the dance, I would say something. Say, this is, again, if this individual or whoever is doing the round dance program portion of the program, maybe you want to just enlighten them on how they need to program their dance in coordination with yours. And some of the best round dance leaders in this activity will follow up with whatever it is you just did. If you had them going, they're going to keep them going, and then maybe they'll do something different. And then it's your turn, And so most of them will follow up, even with a style of music. If you do a big band sound, they usually will follow up right off with maybe a big band sound team also, and then on to something else. Yeah.
Questions?
John Burns, when you call a club and the night itself has a special theme, St. Patrick's or Spanish Mexican night or something, Christmas, how many of the tips is right in the line of the theme normally?
I try to do some if they let me know in advance. I don't necessarily carry with me the records that will fit into whatever theme it is, but I do carry seasonal records in the case at all times, so that if it's March 17th, I can find an Irish tune in there somewhere. But just your question reminded me of a situation that occurred the other night and has me still thinking. I'm not sure it has to do with programming, it may have something to do more with showmanship, but I'm a pretty straight fellow. I'm not the entertainer that any of these three are. They all put on great shows. I'm just good old Jim from down the street, and I come in week after week, and I'm pretty straight, and I don't make funny jokes very well. But I got to a dance a couple of weeks ago, and I had gotten a flyer in advance saying this is a crazy hat dance. And I thought, gee, I wear hats a lot because I don't go out in the sunshine without a hat on, and I have quite a collection. Some of them are a trifle unusual. And so I bagged up 10 of them and took them with me. When I got there, it turns out the club, as often happens, didn't pay much attention to the theme, and there were only a couple of people in the hall with crazy hats. But I wore a different hat for every tip. I called one of the best dances that I've ever called. And I am still wondering how much the effect of those hats on me produced a different feel to that dance. It was an interesting experience. I still don't know the answer, but I offer it to you as an illustration of the fact that sometimes programming is not entirely tied to the choreographic content.
Well, I think at this point we've come close to the end. Did I say this will be